This is Nightline and I'm Raymond Go. News making the headlines. Tackling corruption essential to build a nation of high integrity, says King. And more people evacuated in Terengganu and Kelantan floods. Good morning. In a bid to build a nation that is transparent and with integrity, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong wants important issues of corruption in Malaysia to be addressed. In the royal address at the opening of the first meeting of the fifth session of the 14th Parliament on Monday, Al-Sultan Abdullah Riayatuddin Al-Mustafa Billah Shah said he viewed the matter seriously. The King said he believed that the government is currently doing its best in implementing the policies and initiatives of the National Anti-Corruption Plan through enforcement, prevention and education to combat all forms of corruption.
Beta percaya kerajaan sedang melaksanakan dasar dan inisiatif Plan Anti-Rasuah Nasional menerusi tindakan penguatkuasaan, pencegahan dan pendidikan bagi membentera segala bentuk jenayah rasuah. Kerajaan juga sedang menambah baik sistem penyampaian perkhidmatan kerajaan melalui inisiatif kerajaan digital secara end-to-end supaya lebih telus, cekap dan profesional.
At the same time, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong also expressed appreciation for the loyalty and sincere contributions of all national frontliners, members of the civil service, the Malaysian Armed Forces, the Royal Malaysia Police, as well as government agencies who have dedicated their services to making Malaysia peaceful and prosperous. On natural disasters, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong also urged for disaster management mechanisms to constantly be upgraded to face any threats due to environmental degradation and climate change. The King said this will involve cross-social roles and responsibilities among the government, private sector, civil society, organizations and volunteers, especially from the youths and general members of the public. In Terengganu, a 15-year-old boy became the first casualty of the worsening floods after he drowned near his house in Kemaman at about noon on Monday. He was identified as Muhammad Alimi Hashim. And over in Kelantan, the floods claimed its third victim, a 15-year-old boy, Hawari Kodir, in Pasir Mas. In both the states, more than 14,000 people have been evacuated to temporary relief centers. According to the Social Welfare Department's Disaster Info portal, the victims, consisting of 6,047 families, are now placed in 185 relief centers in the two states. The Terengganu Disaster Management Committee Secretariat said Kemaman recorded the highest number of flood victims, with 138 relief centers opened, namely in Besut, Hulu Terengganu, Setiu, Dungun, Kemaman, Kuala Terengganu, Kuala Nerus and Marang. In Kelantan, the Social Welfare Department Disaster Info application reported that a total of 47 relief centers were opened, 7 in Kuala Krai, 9 in Tanah Merah, 1 in Jeli, 22 in Pasir Mas and 8 in Pasir Puteh, involving 2,522 families. A total of 407,097 candidates will be sitting for the Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia SPM 2021 written examinations starting March 2nd until March 29th. Education Ministry said 50,154 invigilators have been appointed to ensure the smooth running of the examination, which will be held at 3,382 examination centers nationwide. In a statement on Monday, the ministry said all candidates are reminded to refer to the SPM examination timetable for information on the date, time, code, papers, as well as instructions that need to be followed during the examination. Candidates are reminded to bring along their identification cards and exam slip and follow the guidelines provided by the ministry, which the candidates can download from the ministry's official portal. According to the ministry, candidates are also reminded to adhere to the Standard Operating Procedures (SOP) on COVID-19 prevention as issued by the National Security Council and Health Ministry to curb the spread of the virus. Over 90% of critical care beds at intensive care units (ICU) in Kelantan have been occupied as of Sunday. Besides Kelantan, 5 other states also reported a bed occupancy rate of above 50%, namely Johor with 69%, Putrajaya with 67%, Kuala Lumpur with 62%, Perak and Malacca both at 58%. Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham Abdullah said as for bed utilisation rate in low-risk treatment and quarantine centres (PKRC), Malacca was the only state with a bed occupancy rate exceeding 50%. Tan Sri Dr. Noor Hisham also said that the data on daily hospital admissions for COVID-19 cases differ from the breakdown of new daily cases according to infection levels. Commenting further, Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin in his Twitter posting said although the country's daily RT had steadily dropped to 1.05, it is too early to say that Malaysia has gone past the Omicron variant peak. Even with 96% of active cases recovering at home and hospital capacity is currently under control. As of Sunday, a total of 24,466 new COVID-19 cases were recorded. Travellers under the Malaysia-Singapore Vaccinated Travel Lane (VTL) One-Stop Centre (OSC) and those from the United Kingdom (UK) no longer need to undergo the one-week COVID-19 tests after arrival starting Thursday. Health Minister Khairi Jamaluddin said the relaxation included the self-test for VTL and OSC travellers on Day 2, Day 4 and Day 6. and the professional RTK antigen tests on Day 3 and Day 5. In a statement on Monday, Khairi said for travellers under the Langkawi International Travel Bubble, they no longer need to do the RT-PCR or the professional RTK antigen before leaving the island. As for travellers from the UK, the daily self-tests throughout the quarantine period will also be lifted. Khairi added that also lifted was the need for a liaison officer for short-term business travellers under the Malaysian Investment Development Authority via OSC. However, they need to follow the controlled itinerary that is issued and approved by the OSC committee. Khairi also said the requirement for a PCR test 2 days prior to departure for Malaysia and arrival PCR test would remain. He also stressed that the relaxation on the Standard Operating Procedures (SOP) only applied to travellers entering Malaysia under the VTL, LITB and OSC. For travellers not under these 3 programs, the existing SOP or protocols are still in effect. Is fist bump permissible under the current circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, apparently not. In Johor, as the state election campaign was gaining momentum, contesting party Muda said one of its candidates was slapped with a 1,000 ringgit compound for violating standard operating procedures, allegedly for engaging in a fist bump with another supporter. Bukit Batu candidate Azrul Rahani was issued the fine under the Prevention and Control of Infectious Diseases Act 1988. The violation occurred during nominations on Saturday, and the compound was issued the same day. In a statement issued, Muda said the offence stated that the individual failed to observe physical distancing. The party said 1,000 ringgit compound was issued. It said the offence involved physical distancing or fist bump between Azrul and a supporter outside the nomination centre. As fierce fighting continued across Ukraine on Monday, Kyiv said it would push for a ceasefire at talks with officials from Moscow. However, while the talks brought tentative hope for an end to the war, Ukraine's president made it clear before the discussion began that he wasn't expecting any major breakthrough. And even as the meeting took place, there were reports of intensified Russian shelling in eastern Ukrainian cities. Russia would not clarify its aims for the talks, but Ukraine's key demands were an immediate ceasefire and the withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine. The meeting on the Belarusian border comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his nuclear deterrent force to be on high alert, a huge escalation in Russia's confrontation with Western powers who have increased their supply of lethal aid to Ukraine and imposed crippling financial sanctions on Moscow. Earlier, a defiant Russia said on Monday that it could ride out Western sanctions over its invasion of neighboring Ukraine, as President Vladimir Putin huddled with officials to discuss the economic turmoil of the 5-day-old war. Speaking to the media, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia has the necessary potential to compensate for the damage and has been systematically preparing for quite a long time for possible sanctions, including the heaviest sanctions that Kyiv are now facing. The severe financial punishment imposed by the West has sent the ruble into tailspin, with the Russian currency down 20% against the dollar in midday trading. The Russian central bank more than doubled its main interest rate to 20% to try to prop it up. Meanwhile, 9 Malaysians and their 2 dependents who were evacuated from Kyiv in Ukraine to Poland are now on their way to Kuala Lumpur and are expected to arrive on Tuesday. Prime Minister Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri Yaakob, in his posting on Facebook, said a Singaporean national was also evacuated along with a Malaysian convoy. The Prime Minister also acknowledged Singapore's High Commission's appreciation and gratitude for the assistance rendered by Malaysia in helping the Singaporean citizen evacuate from Kyiv. Datuk Seri Ismail Sabri said the Malaysian government always cherished the close ties between the two countries and called on the Republic to work together as an ASEAN family. In the meantime, Russia's invasion of Ukraine will definitely affect efforts to speed up the global economic recovery, including for Malaysia. Senior Minister of International Trade and Industry, Datuk Seri Muhammad Azmin Ali, said any conflict would definitely hurt the global economy and would not help any country move towards a positive economic growth. He said Malaysia not only has trade relations with Russia, but also people-to-people relations, including in the field of education and several industries, such as the aerospace sector. On the country's trade target of 2 trillion ringgit by 2022, Datuk Seri Azmin said Malaysia, as a trading nation, needed to find a solution or other more proactive efforts to ward off the effects of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. After the break, over 10 million ringgit worth of drugs seized in raids nationwide. Stay with us. to Nightline. The government is currently in the process of negotiations to finalize the Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, on the recruitment of foreign workers with Vietnam, Cambodia, India and Sri Lanka. Human Resource Minister Datuk Sri M. Saravanan said the previous MOU with the source countries had expired during the implementation of the Movement Control Order, MCO. In a statement on Monday, he said his ministry had concluded and signed Memoranda of Understanding with 10 source countries, the first being signed with China in 2003. He said the ministry was in the midst of finalizing the MOU that had expired, adding that an MOU was inked with Bangladesh in November last year. Commenting further, Datuk Sri Saravanan also said his ministry has proposed the implementation of e-wages as a salary monitoring system for foreign workers. He said the initiative will be implemented soon to monitor prompt payment of wages to foreign workers, adding that the proposed system was agreed by the Cabinet on January 12th this year. The Enforcement Agency Integrity Commission, Eaic, has lashed out at former Inspector General of Police, IGP Tan Sri Abdul Hamid Bado, saying that he had lost his right to comment on the police cartel issue. Eaic said Tan Sri Abdul Hamid had not submitted any evidence to support his accusation of the existence of a cartel in the police force. In a statement on Monday, Eaic also said that Tan Sri Abdul Hamid had refused to have his statement recorded to explain further on the issue. The statement signed by Eaic Chairman Tan Sri Siddiq Hassan, his deputy and 5 commissioners came after Tan Sri Abdul Hamid said that the Commission's findings on the police cartel issue was shallow and incorrect. Eaic also said that as the former IGP, he should have taken action to address the cartel issue while he was still in office in 2020. According to Eaic, witnesses in the investigation had also said that Tan Sri Abdul Hamid made the statement just before his contract as IGP ended in May 2021 and questioned the motive behind his disclosure. A former chief executive CEO of a media organization on Monday surrendered some documents to the Anti-Corruption Commission, MACC. It was learnt that she arrived at the MACC headquarters at 9 a.m. and spent 3 hours with graft investigators, where she was likely to have explained the contents of the documents that she had brought along. However, it is not known what the documents were. This was the second time that the ex-CEO was called by graft investigators. On February 24th, she was summoned by the MACC for her statement to be recorded. 2 days before that, former Goldman Sachs banker Tim Leisner told a U.S. court that a former CEO of a media organization had demanded the gift of a London house for her silence over his involvement with One Malaysia Development Berhad 1MDB. The Federal Police seized 745.9 kilograms of drugs worth more than 10 million ringgit in countrywide raids. This was part of Op Tapis Khas from February 23rd to 25th, which followed a similar operation in January. Bukit Aman's Narcotics CID Director, Datuk Ayub Khan Maidin Piche, said 4,579 people aged 14 to 60 were arrested for various drug offences during the operation. The suspects are being investigated under different sections of the Dangerous Drugs Act 1952, the Poisons Act and Dangerous Drugs Special Preventive Measures Act 1985. The operation was jointly conducted by Bukit Aman's Narcotics CID and their counterparts throughout the country. A total of 1,733 officers took part. He urged the public to channel information related to drug trafficking activities to the Narcotics CID hotline, as per the numbers shown on the screen. Thousands flee as weather bomb hits Australian cities. The details when Nightline returns.
들어갈게. 미안. 거기서 만나?
저 혹시 유미 남자친구분?
아 근데요, 유미 선배.
Welcome back to Nightline. As many as 75 Malaysians in Queensland, Australia, affected by the floods have been evacuated to temporary relief centres, PPS. Foreign Minister Datuk Seri Saifuddin Abdullah said out of 200 Malaysians identified, 75 students from various agencies have been evacuated and another 35 are still waiting to be relocated. In a statement on Monday, Wisma Putra said the Malaysian High Commission in Canberra, in collaboration with Malaysian community in Brisbane representatives and Malaysian Students' Council of Australia MACC, was monitoring and coordinating the relocation of affected Malaysians to relief centres. Datuk Seri Saifuddin, in his Twitter posting on Monday, said overall there were 348 Malaysians registered in Queensland, including about 200 students. According to the Weather Forecast Agency, he said a southbound rain situation is expected to affect some areas around northeast New South Wales and Sydney. Datuk Seri Saifuddin said in this regard, the Malaysian High Commission in Canberra, in collaboration with the Malaysian Consulate in Sydney, was always on alert and monitoring and reporting on the development of the floods from time to time. He also advised Malaysians in the affected areas to always give priority to their safety and comply with all instructions issued by the local authorities from time to time. Meanwhile, the unprecedented flood emergency unfolding in New South Wales is likely to worsen in coming days. State Premier Dominic Perrottet, in announcing the matters on Monday, ordered for tens of thousands of people to evacuate, especially those in Lismore, where the area is expected to be submerged under 16 metres of flood water.
We are seeing unprecedented flooding, particularly in northern New South Wales, and we expect that flooding to get worse. Many would have seen distressing images of survival, and there are many distressing reports, particularly around the Lismore area, of people who are isolated and currently stranded. And I want to make it clear that we are doing everything we can to provide help and support as quickly and as safely as possible.
Since the deluge began last Thursday, at least 9 people have been reported dead, and rescue teams were still searching for at least 4 people reported missing on Monday. Hundreds of people across the region have also been left stranded for hours on rooftops amid the crisis, as state and federal emergency services struggle to access impacted areas. Fully vaccinated travellers to New Zealand will soon no longer need to self-isolate upon arrival. In announcing the matter, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said beginning March 3rd, instead of isolating for a week, returning Kiwis will be able to step off the plane and immediately connect with family and friends. Travellers, however, will still need to test negative for the virus before leaving and after arriving. If the traveller tests positive for the virus, they will be required to self-isolate in line with requirements for New Zealanders. The changes will apply only to returning New Zealanders, as tourists are still not allowed to visit, but the Cabinet is expected to review the timings of the remaining steps for opening back up to the world in the coming weeks. Medvedev replaces Djokovic as world number 1. Sports is up next. Sports now. Russia's Daniil Medvedev on Monday became the 27th player to reach the #1 spot in the men's ATP tennis rankings. Medvedev overtakes 20-time Grand Slam champion Novak Djokovic of Serbia, who had held the top spot for a record 361 weeks in total. Medvedev, the 2021 US Open champion, becomes the first player outside the Big Four of Djokovic, Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal and Andy Murray to move to #1 in the world rankings in 18 years, 3 weeks and 6 days, since Andy Roddick reached top spot on 1st February 2004. The last time there was a new world #1 in men's tennis was more than 5 years ago when Murray made it there on 7th November 2016. Medvedev is the third Russian to achieve the feat and joins Yevgeny Kafelnikov and Marat Safin, who were respectively top for 6 and 9 weeks. On to football now. Borussia Dortmund lost ground in the German title race after being held to a 1-1 draw at relegation strugglers Augsburg. Thorgan Hazard opened the scoring for the visitors with a fine individual effort on 35 minutes. But despite dominating the game after that, Dortmund could not find a second goal. Noah Bazi headed in the equalizer with 12 minutes remaining. Dortmund remain in second place but are now 8 points behind leaders Bayern Munich. With their hard-earned point, Augsburg move up to 15th and out of the bottom 3. In Tokyo,